Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Homeschool Minnesota. My name is Dayle Annand. I'm so glad that you guys are here with us today. Homeschool Minnesota podcast is an outreach of Minnesota Association of Christian Home Educators. We're so glad that you guys are with us. Today, I'm excited to welcome back Craig Harrison. Now, some of you might remember that a couple of years ago, we had Craig on to talk about his book, and I have it right here, Your Child's Best Teacher. We're going to do something more with that later, and we'll talk a little bit about it today. But for today, we're going to actually talk with him about another part of his life that you guys may or may not know about him. Craig is a husband, father of 2 boys, homeschool dad, and author of this book that we just talked about. We are going to be talking today about his role as the primary teacher in the homeschool in his family. He is the one who teaches his boys and does all the homeschool things. So welcome, Craig Harrison.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here. So when I say homeschool dad, you really are the primary teacher. Your wife is there, she encourages you, but she's not the primary teacher. You are. What makes you their best teacher? When you wrote your book, Your Child's Best Teacher, what makes you, not that your beautiful, wonderful wife would not be a wonderful teacher, but when you guys were discussing homeschooling, what brought that to I can do this?
Yeah, well, the child's best teacher is the child's parents.
Right.
And the role that God gave us is to raise up our child in the fear and admonition of the Lord. And education, I've come to see it more holistically rather than just academics, but it includes moral education, it includes religious education, social education, and the parents are the people that God has designed to be there with the child to raise them up in all areas of their lives. So that's why I see the parents as the child's best teacher.
I agree. I think that's really good. In your experience, what, if any, differences do you see between mom being the primary teacher and dad being the primary teacher? I think in my head, there's a difference because I see how moms play with their kids differently than dads do. Moms read to their kids differently than dads do. Moms feed their kids differently than dads do. What is it that you see? Is there any difference that you've experienced or that you've seen when you compare what you do with what other homeschool families do?
Yeah, there are differences. There are differences between men and women, and God designed it that way. And mothers are typically much more nurturing. So you can't categorize everybody the same way, but in general, fathers tend to be more hands-on and active and more mathematically or scientifically inclined. But we all bring strengths to the parenting role. And I think the bigger differences were in myself personally, how I was coping with being put into that role. And those were the things that I had to come to grips with in order to do a good job of teaching my children.
Yeah, I think what has been a struggle that you have had with homeschooling your boys? Has there been a couple of struggles that you've had that you're thinking, well, I wonder if anybody else deals with this?
Yeah, there were lots of struggles, and my journey into being a homeschool dad was a long time coming. It wasn't something that we had planned to do to teach our children. It certainly wasn't something that I had planned to do. And my background is as an engineer, and engineers tend to think about the world in a particular way. And we tend not to be great at teaching other people because when we understand something, it's like, well, that's obvious. And so you should understand it the same way that I do. My mother was a teacher, and my older brother had the same sort of personality, and he's a much better teacher than I am, even though academically he didn't achieve the same things that I did. So for me, just simply the teaching was hard to get into. But I think over the journey and being put in that position, which wasn't my choice, what I noticed particularly about being a dad is that as husbands, we feel it's like a built-in need to protect and provide for our families. Pope Pope Leo back in 1891 said it is the most sacred law of nature that a father should provide food and all necessaries for those whom he has begotten. And that's kind of how we feel. It's our role to be the provider. And the biggest thing that I had to grapple with was feeling like I was failing in that role. Not just physically, but also spiritually, because 1 Timothy 5:8 says that if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his family, he is denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. And so throughout that time, for many years while I was teaching, I was grappling with this sense of feeling like I had failed my family and failed God. And I knew in the back of my mind that, there must be more to it than that God couldn't have been upset with me because of the role that I was in. And what I came to realize is that in that verse, 1 Timothy 5:8, providing for, we as Westerners, we kind of think of that as financial money, earning an income and providing for our family that way. But the word provide really means care for, and there's no greater way to care for your family than to protect your children and nurture them and educate them and help them to grow. And that doesn't take away the desire as a dad to be the provider. I still feel that. I still feel really awkward. In fact, it was just the other day that somebody asked me what I did. And I know that as a dad, I want to be able to say what I'm doing, and I feel like I'm not doing what I should. But as far as God's concerned, his desire for fathers is to be raising children the way that he has asked us to in the Bible. In Ephesians 6:4, it says, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children, instead bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord." And in that verse, it's specifically to fathers. In 1 Timothy 5:8, it isn't gender specific. It means parents. Parents provide and parents care for your children. But God's saying in Ephesians, fathers, specifically males, bring your children up in the fear and admonition of the Lord.
I think that's really good. And I think I could see that being, society has like definite gender roles, right? Of what they expect from moms and dads in a family. And I think that you're right. Providing is caring for, and you are caring for your family, and your family is being provided for. It'd be different if you were a stay-at-home dad taking, homeschooling your kids, and you could barely put food on the table or something like that. That'd be a little bit of a different situation. But you're actually doing what you're called to do, which is taking care of your family. And this is the role that God has put you in. And I love how you look at it that way. And I think it's an encouragement to other dads and other families. Like when you're looking at other families who are maybe dealing with, we want to homeschool, but both of us are working, both of us need to work right now for whatever reason. I mean, there's so many different reasons why both parents need to work. And usually it has to do with they've got to take care of their family, and there's bills and things to take care of, and a lifestyle that needs to be, responsibilities, I guess, more than lifestyle, responsibilities that need to be maintained. And you look at that and you think, how does that work? And, have you talked with other dads or other families who are processing, how do we make this homeschooling thing work for us?
I've only met in person 2 or 3 other dads who are taking the lead role in educating their children. And I know there are more out there.
Yeah.
And part of the reason for writing the book was to be able to share my experience and encourage people who are in that situation. Because I think when you look at the world around us, there isn't much of a greater responsibility than we can have than to protect our children and to raise them up. And as far as home education goes, I wasn't evangelistic about it when we started, but over the last few years, I've come to see how important it is for our families, for the faith, for the Christian church, but also for society, that we're raising good children. So I think that role is really important, and if that's what we need to do in order to do it as dads, if we need to take the lead role, then there's nothing more important that we can do than to do that. But in talking to other dads, so the ones that I have come across, they've experienced the same sorts of struggles that I have, the feeling of not being the husband and the father that they should be. But it's interesting because I've always wondered how it relates to mothers in that role as well. And so specifically when I've spoken about this, I have talked to mums and said, does any of this resonate with you? And what I've found is that yes, it does, because over the last generation, really, with the growth of the feminist movement, women were told that in order to really be fulfilled, you need to have a career.
Yeah.
And maybe you take a bit of time out to raise a family, but get back into the career so that you can be fulfilled. And so they've had this message, and the ones that have been brave and said, no, my role is as a mother and teaching my children, there's still been that sense that I'm missing out on something, that, my true purpose was really to have a career, and I've given that up in order to stay at home with the kids or teach my children. And so I've found that a lot of women as well have resonated with a number of the things that I've had to go through and wrestle with.
Yeah, so good. So that brings us to your book, Your Child's Best Teacher. Tell me a little bit about your reason for writing it. I mean, you alluded to it a little bit earlier on in this podcast, but just what was I'm going to sit down and write this. This is something that's burning in me and I need to get it on paper. What was that reason?
Well, probably the first impetus for writing was to be able to grapple with these questions myself. So I will confess that I was very reluctant to get into homeschooling. My wife had the job and I had been unable to find work. And so when the idea of home education came up, I knew that was going to be me. I'm not a teacher. And so I went into it feeling very sorry for myself, feeling upset with the way that things were happening. And that comes through in the way that, your children pick it up. They're pretty smart. Yeah. And I knew that I had to deal with that at some stage. And writing the book allowed me to sit down and think, okay, what about the spiritual thing? Am I really letting God down? Or is this the role that he has for me? What about socially? How do I deal with the way that I'm interacting with other dads, with other people? What about emotionally and psychologically? And so writing the book gave me an opportunity to work that out for myself and then to share what I was learning. But I also thought that it wasn't just that I'm a dad, and that is fairly unique. And there are things that I thought this provides an interesting perspective. It's not necessarily the right perspective, but mothers have a perspective, I have a perspective, and you don't often hear from the dads who are teaching what their perspective is. So I thought that would be informative for people. But more than that, because I have a background as an engineer, I thought that the way that I have approached things would be of interest to others. So I wanted to share the way that I'd gone about teaching my children, the things that I'd learned, the approaches that I took, what I thought was important as an engineer. And in many ways, I felt that was a bigger differentiator for me as a homeschool dad rather than actually being a dad. So that was originally what I was planning to do. But as I researched and read more and thought about it, my publisher encouraged me to include a section on why we had decided to educate our children. And so I started off the book by thinking about education in general. What is it that we're trying to achieve? It's easy to say the word education, but what is education? What are our goals and what are we wanting to get out of it? And the more I wrote about it and thought about it, the more passionate I got about the importance of home education, but also just sharing what I was learning about education as well. So that's what I call a defense of home education in the first part of the book. And In many ways, I think that had probably as much impact, if not more, on me and my thinking than in wrestling with the questions about being a dad and as a homeschooler.
Yeah, that's so good. In the book, you do a lot of statistics, which I mean, I would not expect anything less from an engineer who's very mathematical,
Yeah.
and the statistics is what motivates you, I can tell, and so and encourages you in what you're doing has value and is long lasting.
Hmm.
Which I think every homeschool parent and every parent wants to know that the decisions that they're making for their children are actually good decisions, but how do we know that? And so you bring a lot of statistics into your book, which I think is really, really good. And it makes a good case for homeschooling, which I think is really important, especially when families are dealing with maybe some pushback from other family or friends or their community in general, for them to go, but these are some reasons why homeschooling is a good choice. And
Hmm.
so what was there a stat or a statistic or something that you researched that you were like, that is surprising? And it just kind of really helped you to go, yes, we are making the right decision here.
Yeah, that's just my background
Yeah.
in science. Is to when I started writing, I thought, okay, I don't want it to be an academic book, so I'm not going to have footnotes or references or anything like that. I just couldn't do it. I wanted to be able to back up everything that I said, and I know that it's easy to make statements like uh, homeschooling is the best choice for your children. But I wanted to try and make sure that everything I said I could defend as well.
Hmm.
And there aren't, there isn't good research on, okay, let me not say that. There is good research, but there isn't a lot of research
Yes.
on the impact of home education. I think in terms of the numbers, though, the sheer numbers of people that are educating their children, so it's gone up and down, but it's well over 10% in the USA. In other countries, it's tougher. But if you think about 10% of the population, it doesn't take a lot of people to change the culture of society. And we're looking around at the USA at the moment, thinking that a small number of people is really impacting the direction of the country. But 10% of families, if you think about that, and the number of young people that are growing up in that environment, being nurtured in their faith, being good, solid citizens, the
Hmm.
impact that they are going to have in the generation ahead is going to be fascinating to see. And just one example, uh, our two boys went to Teen Pact this year, which is a government legislative program at the state capitol. They learn about government from a biblical perspective.
Hmm.
And my oldest son wanted uh, to to meet with the people that had been on that program outside of the program, had been a couple of years before, and it was like a year before he met them again. He said it would be really good to get together. So he and uh, another friend got together and set up this meeting where people came and just hang out. They had a bit of a program, but towards the end of it, they had some worship, and they got up. Somebody played the piano, somebody played the guitar, and
Mm.
I think my wife and I were in the background, just about crying, because you think these are quality kids. They're pleasant, they're polite, they're worshiping the Lord. They're they're doing it by themselves, and you think that the quality of these people that are coming through is going to have an impact on society.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that's just such an encouraging thing is that, one of the things that I've been speaking on a lot lately is keeping it biblical and giving our
Mhm.
kids like how homeschooling is like, in essence, it's discipleship 101 and it's giving our kids that solid, solid, solid biblical foundation that you can
Mm.
really only do in homeschooling. You because you get to choose every single piece of curriculum, every single thing, activity and everything, and you can make sure that it's God honoring and encouraging to our kids' spiritual growth.
Mm.
And it puts their feet so firmly planted in the word. And they grow up knowing who they are in Christ, understanding, what it is to actually live a missional life. This is what we can teach them in homeschooling, which just makes things so wonderful. If there was no other reason to homeschool, that right there is enough of a reason for me. And for, I think, a lot of families, is just that right there alone is going to be the biggest reason of all. What do you say to parents, Craig, who are out there and they're listening, and like I said, they're trying to figure out, can I actually do this? Can I actually, because, we get told by the establishment that, well, but you're not a teacher, but you're not qualified. I mean, you have a child with, ADHD, or you have a child who's autistic, or you have a child who has, who's gifted and talented. How are you going to challenge them and teach them? And how are you going to get them? How are you going to teach your child to read? You're not a reading specialist. You don't know how to do that. What do you say to families who are like, maybe they're right. Look at all that we've got going on. We can barely pull family together to do dinner some nights. And yet here we are thinking, let's take on our entire family's education as well. What would you say to them to encourage them?
It's a pretty simple answer. The answer is yes, you can do it.
You can.
There's no question about it. You can. Now, we might have to figure out how. And in our family's case, it was that I needed to be the teacher. And so some families, they might need to share the responsibility. They might need to tap into grandparents. There are lots of ways that you can do it. But the bottom line for me is that, yes, you can do it. And following up with that, it's that, yes, you have the qualifications to do it. Right through high school as well. There's no need to think that high school is a stumbling block or anything like that. And it doesn't depend on the qualifications that you have. It depends on whether you love your children. And that's something that professional teachers, they can be wonderful and they can have a huge impact on children.
Absolutely.
But it's not their children. These are your children. And it's your responsibility, and you've been teaching them from day one. So whether you know a topic or not, there are so many resources available these days, plenty of resources, so there's no excuse. But you can learn alongside your children as well if you don't know something. You don't need to have all the answers. In fact, it's really helpful for children when you don't have all the answers, because you're demonstrating how to go about finding something out. We're not going to be told all the answers in life. We're going to come across things where we have to sit down and figure out how to do it. And modeling how to do that is one way for our children to learn it. So there's absolutely different options available and different resources. You have the qualifications as a parent. And that's why, so one huge lesson I learned is that, and something that I found really, really hard, is that your children will remember how you make them feel a lot longer than they'll remember what you taught them.
That's so good.
And if we think back, I went to a public school, my wife did as well, and those of us that went to public schools, that the teachers that we remember the most aren't the ones that taught us something in particular, but they're the ones that made us feel affirmed and cared for and special. And as a parent, we love our children more than anything. But I had to learn, because I was working through frustrations of my own and disappointments in the way that my career had gone. I had to learn that it was critically important the way I was making my children feel, not just what I was teaching them. I could teach them all the content, but if they didn't feel the love from me, then it didn't mean anything. So education is far more than just the academics, the facts and figures that you learn. And we're in such a great position to be able to create that environment for our children where they will learn. If they don't learn it today, they can learn it tomorrow. They can learn it later on in life. But if we make them feel loved and affirmed, then that'll create the special feeling that they need to know that, yes, we can do this as well. We can grow and develop in a safe and godly environment.
That's so good. I think the thing that we have to remember is that in homeschooling, we give our kids two things: who they are and how to learn. And we can get, we're going to forget things. We're going to forget to teach them things.
Yeah.
We can teach them all the content in the world and half of it's going to just fly out the window. But if we teach them how to learn, if we teach them how to find information, how to break that information down and how to communicate that information, and then we give them that sense of like, this is who you are. You are, a child of God. You are given gifts and abilities and responsibility, and you're part of this family. And if we can give them that, where they can walk out into the world knowing who they are and how to learn, man, we've given them everything they need to succeed. Any last words of encouragement you want to give to parents who might be listening?
This applies to all parents, but particularly for any dads out there. Just know that the role that you are playing is so critical for your children. Yeah. Something that was really meaningful to me is that I read a quote from Jordan Peterson, and he has some very powerful things to say to men and to boys growing up. And one thing he said is that we need to choose, we need to recognize the dragons that we're out there battling, because as dads, we want to be out there fighting a battle. And what I realized is that for many men with a career, their job is the dragon that they're seeking to slay to protect their family. So they're out there working hard to earn money to provide for their family. And as a homeschool dad, I'm thinking I'm not out there trying to slay the corporate dragon, but I came to realize that sacrifice was the dragon that I had to slay in order to protect my family. And so it's still a battle, and I still have to fight it. It's just very different to a career. But sacrifice is what it is that we're defeating in order to provide this environment for our children.
That's so good. Craig, thank you so much. And for those who might be interested in hearing more from Craig, we do have a previous 2 podcasts actually that Craig did with us about his book, and he will be coming back on for a couple other things. And keep your eyes open on our social medias and things like that, and we will be featuring Craig on a couple things coming up too. So we just are so excited, so grateful, Craig. Thank you so much, and what a blessing you are to families, and just grateful that you took time out today to speak to us.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you all next time. Thank you so much.